This conference will now be recorded.
Very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of our Honorable Secretary General, Dr. G.P. Agrawal, I would like to heartily welcome Govind Raj, Secretary, former founder, Editor-in-Chief, Bloomberg, UTB, and Mr. Ravi Roy, Senior Advisor, WASME. It is my privilege to all the dignitaries who have taken out their valuable time to participate in this webinar. I will just welcoming all the dignitaries who have taken out their valuable time to participate in this webinar. Let me introduce WASME. WASME is World Association for Small and Medium Enterprises. We are the international organization having headquartered at Noida, India. We are just facilitating MSMEs across globe. We have got member representatives in more than 100 countries. We are just spearheading and development and promotion of MSMEs in policy advocacy, information dissemination, conferences, seminars, events, training, publication, network linkages, and many more since 1980. And we have got the consultative and observer status of the United Nations also. Whenever we are just talking about the MSMEs, they are the backbone of our economy. An estimated 6.33 crore unincorporated MSMEs engaged in non-agricultural economic activities. They are employing 12 crore persons across country, and they have got they are contributing 30% to the GDP and generating 70 to 80% of the employment, and their contribution to the export is 45%. And whenever we are just talking about the MSME, the micro one is a very important one. They are 95% having turnover less than 5 crores. So the today's topic is the media and the lessons post-COVID. So I'll be just focusing on, I'll be just briefing about the Indian media and entertainment industry, which is 1.82 trillion, that was in 2019, and starting at 25,000 crore loss. This was estimated by CRISIL, and the lockdown has had very effect on the multiple sectors in media and entertainment industry. While box offices, event management companies take a huge blow, OTT services are more involved than ever before. One survey conducted by Event and Entertainment Management Association (EEMA) with 170 companies found that more than 50% of the organization had 90% of their businesses cancelled between March and July due to this COVID pandemic. And this pandemic has already disrupted the whole business and very difficult to have, because day by day the COVID is already increasing. We have to live with COVID. Today the cases is approximately 1 lakh, and we at the same time we have to just carry on our business. So we have taken today's topic is media analysis. I'm not going in details because we have got esteemed panelists to discuss on the topic. So we have got the esteemed panelists Govind Raj Ethiraj, who is a television and print journalist, founder of Book, a fact-checking initiative. He anchors seasonal shows and Indian news television, the current one being of big business on Bloomberg Twin. And the most recent big policy was on public service broadcaster Rajya Sabha TV. He also writes for newspapers such as Business Standard. Previously, Govind Raj was founder, editor-in-chief of Bloomberg TV India, a 24-hour business news service launched out of Mumbai in 2008, and a partnership between Bloomberg LLP and the UTB Group in India. Prior to that, he worked with Business Standard as editor, new media, with a specific mandate of integrating the newspapers, operations with its digital or web platform. He also spent around 5 years each with CNBC TV 18 and Economic Times. He is a fellow of the Aspen Institute, Colorado, and winner of the BMW Foundation Responsible Leadership Award for 2014 and the 2018 McNulty Prize. And we are fortunate to have another panelist, Mr. Prabir Roy. He's a serial entrepreneur and now is co-founder Payments, a B2B fintech payments company, and has visa at one of its investors. He has worked in government, public and MNC sector as Vice President, CTO, and CEO, and Red Herring Asia Top 100 awardees for promising tech startup companies. In addition, Robbie sits on boards of several private, public, and industry organizations like WASME. I'm just handing over this floor to Prabir so he can carry on. Thank you. Prabir, please.
Thank you, Dr. Sanjeev Lai. Thank you for a very nice introduction for myself and Govind. I would like to welcome all the participants for this webinar. Good afternoon to you all. A very nice introduction by Dr. Sanjeev on Govind. A few minutiae on Govind. Other than being a media expert, he has also worked with Nandan Nilekani at the Aadhaar UIDAI for a couple of years. That's where he got a much broader exposure to public service. And he's a frequent moderator of TEDx webinars, which are often conducted in India. So these are two additional data points for all of us. When I first got an opportunity to reach out to Govind, I know he's very busy. So I was pleasantly surprised that he very quickly agreed to come on board. He himself hosts, I don't know, multiple programs. But then in my mind, I had a mischievous thought, and I said, now Govind, the shoe is on the other foot. And you are not the moderator or anchor, you are the guest. And so anyway, unlike traditional media, this is not about whataboutery or gotcha or on the other handism. As I told Govind a little while back, it's all about being no noise, but a polite jibber jabber. So with this, I would like to shoot into the very first question, Govind. And you're both a well-respected journalist and also a new media entrepreneur, right in the thick of not only the news cycle but also the business cycles. Tell us how your journey has been so far. What made you want to do both from a very early stage in your life? And frankly, has it been all fun?
Prabir, thank you so much. My extended thanks to the WASME and Mr. Laik for inviting me and for that kind introduction. I don't know whether I'm the right person to be on this forum to talk about entrepreneurship, except that by accident I am an entrepreneur. but I nowhere as much or as well qualified as many of you on the platform. I have spent many years in media as a print journalist and then a television journalist, and now in the digital space. So purely by weight of experience, I can claim that I know something, even whether I actually know it or not. So that's really the background. So I've been an entrepreneur now for about 8 years or so. My last job was with what became eventually Bloomberg Television in India. And I essentially, I have been a financial journalist all my life, which is more than 20 years in financial journalism. And my whole focus was looking at company financials, strategy, technology, small enterprises, large enterprises, conglomerates. And I felt that as we came into 2011-12, that I wanted to do something different and maybe use some of the skills that I had to apply it to maybe more public interest journalism. So if you look at India as a country, I mean, forget the government which is there. I mean, because these issues have not really changed with governments. Health, education, gender, environment are some of the most foundational issues in our country. If we fix most of our, let's say, health and education issues, most of our other issues will get fixed as well, like in any country. So so I decided that I want to do something where we do original journalism, more investigative, take more time, and talk about deep issues in health and education and or environment and gender, and then propagate that. So that's how we started India Spend in 2011 and 2012. And we started then, and today do one story a day, which in turn is distributed through our partner publishers. So therefore, it's very likely that you've read an India Spend story, but you may not know that it's from us. So more than 100 people, organizations take our stories around these spaces. So you could have read our story in a Business Standard or a First Post or a Wire or a Scroll, and so on and so forth. So that's how I got into this. And by virtue of doing this, obviously, I had to be an entrepreneur as well, which is a very different ask for someone who's been a journalist who only writes about things as opposed to, or talks about it, as opposed to actually practicing it. Being an entrepreneur in this country is tough. There is no two ways about it. I don't think, I mean, people have, I mean, now that I see a little bit from my own experience and a lot of it by talking to other people, you know, when I used to interview people who used to be, let's say, talking about the tax code, you know, so I always used to wonder, and typically, and you know, that's one of the problems that you've highlighted as well, that you know, the SME sector doesn't get the coverage that it deserves. And we would think that you know, the problems that are being referred to, whether it was to do with direct tax code or indirect taxes, are really the problems of the large companies. And what I've realized now is that this is a problem for everyone, whether it's in tax, interpretation of tax, administering of tax, and challenges which are fairly basic, to do with cash flow, to do with big companies not paying you in time, to do with large vendors who are you know, constantly squeezing you. I mean, that is the life of a small and medium enterprise in this country. And on the other hand, if you want to get a loan, you know, no or very few banks will give you a loan basis cash flow. Essentially, you'll have to put all your personal property and everything on the line, and then maybe get a loan, even if it's a company. So so being an entrepreneur, I mean, I face the same issues as I'm sure everyone in this group, or most people in this group, have, and continue to. So it's tough, and that's when you remind yourself of why you started this. And in my case, that I want to improve the quality of public discourse. I want to use data to tell stories, or data and evidence to tell stories, and keep at it. So that's really the story. And India Spend started, like I said, in around 2011-12. In 2016, and we started Boom, which was an effort to fight misinformation and fake news. This sort of coincided with 2016 end, coincided with the US presidential elections, when it became clear that misinformation and fake news was playing an important role in actually playing an important role in molding opinions and thoughts of people, because they didn't realize that thanks to social media and thanks to the technology and the AI behind social media, how you could be potentially manipulated. So all of that we didn't know then, and I think even now we are not still sure, or are still learning. So that's a big challenge ahead. So that's how we started Boom, where we fight misinformation and fake news primarily, but we also explain issues. We realized that as you go along, I mean, as you consume news or news content, even as you want to find out whether something was fake or not, or is this picture of Sushant Singh Rajput or someone else? Is it from this context, or is it an image from his movie? Or on the other hand, what are the laws regarding consumption of cannabis or drugs, right? So someone may get arrested and get hauled up, but then you should know, without getting into that issue in specific, what are the laws that concern consumption of drugs, independent of everything that's happening. So that's something that we do as well. We explain issues. We explain issues on economy. We explain issues on medicine. There's a lot of stuff in the last 3 or 4, about 4 or 5 months to do with COVID-19, obviously, where there's a lot of misinformation, and COVID itself has become a big chunk of what we do. In India Spend, where we're doing it in more detailed way, but in Boom, where we are in responding to misinformation. So that's really my journey. Our websites are indiaspend.com and boomlive.in or boomlive.in, and you can find us there.
Yeah, I remember from very early days reading your articles in ET, if I'm not mistaken, when you were the corporate editor, if I'm again not mistaken. And at that time, I think what struck one was your reliance on data. And I think you're stuck to that as your core competency. And as your own mentor says, Nandan, data is the new oil. So I hope this leads to some kind of prosperity for you over and above the public service that you're obviously doing as a member of the media. Just coming quickly down to our audience here today. I mean, we are among small business owners and their stakeholders and employees, family members of the business owners. For most of these people, from my limited exposure to them over the last 6 months, has been for them media is typecasted in a certain way, in the sense that, so in your own words, when you joined journalism, how was it perceived? How was media perceived? And how is it perceived right now? Have you been able to had to make some hard choices, to make some mindset changes, or by and large you're stuck to the basic first principles of journalism?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and I think Prabir, and I think many of us who should be posing that question to ourselves, not once in a way, but literally every morning or night before you go to sleep. And I mean, when I joined journalism, it was a different world. It was much smaller. There was no digital. There was no television. So I'm from an earlier era, almost prehistoric. And also you join journalism sometimes because, I mean, people like me joined journalism because there was almost nothing else to do. So if you were not an engineer and a doctor in the 90s, I mean, you only drifted and you wanted to be creative, or you felt you had you wanted to be in part of the creative output field, then they only had advertising or journalism. And then if you felt that you wanted to bring about change or social change in whichever idealistic way we did those days, journalism was the only option. So that's how people like me joined journalism, and they were so, I mean, in a way, one of the things that's changed dramatically is the supply side. So assuming, let's say, demand is consistent to the relative to population, I think the supply side has seen a huge change. And so supply induces some demand, but in general, when there is supply, where there's oversupply, that also causes a distortion in the product, which is what we're seeing today. I think there's a lot of distortion in media products, whether it's television or digital or print, and maybe least so in print, but surely in television and to some extent digital, because there is oversupply. When there is oversupply and your revenue pie is limited, how do you then grab attention, and what do you do to grab attention? So and that's when I guess the first principles usually get sacrificed, because you're trying to move into a different audience space. So unfortunately today, media is seen or defined as television media. It isn't. Television was only one component, but because it penetrates our lives on a daily basis or a nightly basis, because many of us, I mean, not me, but many of us switch on TV to see what's happening on the news. So therefore, we think of that as the representation of media, which in many ways is not true, because television is no longer a good representation of news media for sure, and for many reasons. But it's also not a good representation, I feel, for the supply reasons that I talk about. When there is oversupply, and the market for, let's say, news consumers is limited. So let me give you an illustration. Suppose there are 100 consumers of television. At any point of time, maybe about 90 or so will not watch news, or conversely,
Right.
only 9 or 10 people out of 100 will watch news, right? So the other 90 is not going to watch news. They're going to be watching entertainment, and that's life. Prabir, I know you're a very avid news consumer, but most people are not like you. I mean, I'm a interested party here, but let's say, most people are not like you. They don't get up in the morning and say, I want to find out what's happening. Whether it's in Delhi or Belarusia or in the United States, they don't care. I mean, and that's how life is everywhere around the world. Instead, what you will care about is how am I going to get entertained because I have a hard day's work, I have a family to take care of, and all I want is entertainment. Who wants to find out about news? So it's a small market. Now, how do I get, suppose I want to expand market share now, I have to make sure that people who are part of that 90, which is the entertainment consumers, start consuming news. So therefore, I have to make news entertaining. Right, I have to bring in elements of entertainment. It could be Bollywood, it could be something else. And how do I keep doing that? And in a way that I keep you held, I grip you in a way, exactly like a movie would, right? And in a movie, how do I hold your attention? By constantly raising the tempo of suspense, creating intrigue, bringing in speculation, making your mind go wild. So a lot of this news television has to do, or will have to do, because you're now trying to capture other audiences. And if there were not 400 news channels, this problem may not have been there, at least not to this extent. So anyway, so this is the broad thing. Whereas on the other hand, if you look at print, is somewhat insulated because print's distribution is fixed. So if you get the Times of India and Indian Express and Hindustan Times in your home, you are getting it. You're not going to, every morning you don't change newspapers depending on what the headline of the day is. If you've decided that this is entering your house, you've already granted that newspaper entry. It's a little similar in digital, because you choose what you want depending on the subjects you like, and you more or less stick to that. And you may change once in a way, but you're more or less sticking. Television is different because we have a button. We are surfing all the time, and we're looking to see and what is holding our attention. And equally on the other side of the screen, there are a whole bunch of people trying to figure out what can they do so that they can hold your attention. So I think that's where we are today. We are in a surplus on there is a supply side surplus. There is an attention deficit challenge. There are audiences which are shifting, and all of which leads to a situation where you may not have the best or the most ideal product which particularly serves public interest.
Yeah, I can imagine the demand and supply, oversupply, and I guess narrow demand. So you need to get as much eyeballs as you can. It's a rock in a hard place, and be damned if you do, and be damned if you don't kind of model. Um, Actually, when we didn't get papers the first few months, Govind, we didn't have newspapers, and in the house we had a rule: no TV till after 9 o'clock. So I went through that as a news junkie, as you say. We went through that fairly without any, withdrawal symptoms. But yeah, one can get hooked onto news, but one has to also manage it with entertainment and infotainment, so as to speak. Now, today, as you know, Govind, then all of us are in the same boat, all the audience members here, that we are, and you talk about it a lot in your own programs, we are at the cusp of three once in a blue moon crises. One is the medical crisis, one is the public health crisis, and one is the evolving kind of rolling out economic crisis. It's a perfect storm, once in a 100-year kind of event. So you talk to a lot of people across the world on an everyday basis. What's the sense that you're getting about what you're hearing from the ground as to where we are? Are things going to get better? What can we expect? Or what are some things we should be wary about or conscious about as we go about our daily work and our daily lives?
Yeah, that's probably, I mean, obviously that's a very, very tough one to answer. So let me start with the public health part. I mean, it's very clear that the virus is not going away, and it not only is it not going away, but it's going to be with us for a while. Now, I mean, as it's quite evident to all of us that we are far less careful today with over 4 million cases than we were maybe when we had 100,000 cases or a few 100,000 cases. So, I mean, there was complete palpable fear at that time, and now it seems to be, that we've all, in some ways, moved on, and that's dangerous in its own way. The second thing is that the economy itself, right? I mean, we went from maybe about 7 or 8 quarters of slowdown into a lockdown. And it's very important to note that. I mean, our problems, that is, for instance, a 23.9% fall in GDP in the first quarter is not only because of the pandemic or the virus or the lockdown itself, which was bad. And many countries have not got this right. It's not, I don't think it's fair to blame someone here specifically, because we took a certain call on, locking down, because we knew that our public health systems couldn't cope if there was a major outbreak. And there's no way till it happens whether to what extent it could be. Even your best epidemiologists can only predict based on some models, but very few models survive human behavior. If like in the United States, if people insist on not wearing masks and walking around and throwing parties, then cases will rise, as they're happening right now. On the other hand, if you look at Southeast Asia, with Hong Kong, Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, all these countries, Burma, very, very low rates of, very low fatality rates and case loads. I mean, they have cases, but the cases are very low. But I mean, and their death toll is in many of these countries, it's in the 20s, 30s, maybe 100. So they've been in far greater control of this disease from day one. And that's only, I feel, because they've been conscious about the disease, because they understand SARS. They've seen it in 2003. They've been wearing masks since February, before we even started thinking about it. And to that extent, they've been able to slow down the transmission. So for us, if we were to do all that very well, as in wear masks, constantly sanitize, maintain distance and all that, and yet try and get back to work, I think things will be better. But that's not the way it is. And because, as you drive around in any city, in Mumbai, Delhi, Bangalore, Calcutta, anywhere, and you can see how many people take this seriously, but some don't. And inevitably, those who will not take this seriously will ensure that transmission continues till, of course, or you play Russian roulette in a way that you think, okay, maybe I don't have it, or if I have it, I'm asymptomatic, or the virus load is very low. So even if I'm carrying and I meet Prabir, I may not really transfer it to him, or vice versa. So either ways, I think we are looking at a situation where cases are going to rise. Now, what this means in the economic context is that people are going to disappear from work. I think this is something that is only now sinking in, that it's going to be a trend. It's in a way, it's very similar to what happened in Africa thanks to AIDS in the 90s, right? People just disappeared from work. So in this case, it's not just you. If there's someone else in the family who falls ill or who's tested positive, it doesn't matter whether that person is mild or moderate or severe. If that person tests positive, it's likely you will also be quarantined, right? So if you look ahead now for the next 6 months, it's not 4 million people, let's say 4 million cases. It's 4 into, let's say, 3, maybe 12 million people who have already faced some kind of quarantine or not. And these are official numbers. We are assuming that official numbers are accurate. But any organization, I'm saying, if you look around in your own organizations, you'll find that there are cases. So if my family member falls ill, I will also have to stay at home. And if I fall ill, then family members will also have to stay at home. So, and many people will thus likely disappear from the workforce for periods, right? And this also means it's going to create productivity issues. It's going to create, depending on where you are in the chain or in the organization, it's going to create issues. I think the third thing is the medical part. I think the medical part, there's the vaccine and there's a cure. I think from all my interviews, and I'm talking to people who are fairly qualified in this as frontline doctors, critical care specialists, pulmonologists, cardiologists, immunologists, that there is no clear sense of a cure right now. So, so there are medicines that are being administered, remdesivir and maybe favipiravir, or some people may administer hydroxychloroquine, which others will attack. But there are medicines that are being administered, but the medicines only work if the situation doesn't deteriorate up beyond the point. Once
Right.
your system deteriorates and the immune system kind of caves in, then then the drugs don't work. So dexamethasone is the other this thing. None of these are supposed to be administered by us. These are supposed to be administered under in hospitals by physicians. So this is not to be something that we go out and buy. So there are medicines which are focused on the cure. Which help in treatment, but I don't think there is any clear cure medicine on the immediate horizon. The thing that we do have in the horizon is a vaccine, and you've seen that just day before yesterday or day before the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine trials have been put on hold because one patient developed some sort of adverse symptoms, and those were neurological symptoms. And so they're now studying it as to why it happened, what happened, is it linked with other cases or not linked. But the fresh patient enrollment has been put on hold. So I'm assuming it will get back. There are two other vaccines technically already there, one from China and one from Russia, which is called Sputnik 5. So the hope now is that vaccine will come into our lives in a few months. We will take a vaccine, and that will give us the freedom to get back to work and economic activity and so on. To sum up, I think as a country, we have a lot of problems, including banks, including loans that we've taken as maybe small enterprises, unable to pay, moratoriums. There is no choice but to get back to work. That I think is very, very clear. The more we not go back to work, the more we stay locked, the more we will all suffer. So we have to get back to work. We have to resume production. We have to resume output. We have to consume and ensure that we do this in a way that is safe to ourselves, to our family members, and to our community and workers and so on.
Yeah, I think.
Sorry, long.
Yeah, no, it's perfect, because I think your last few sentences probably said it all when you said that there's no option for us. There is uncertainty, there is anxiousness, there is worry. We're not really sure what is going to happen. It's not predictable, as you rightly said. But at the same time, one thing is for sure is that we have to get back to work in as safe a way as possible. Not only safe for ourselves, but our employees and our environment that we work in. So on that note, slightly to change track, Govind, as you know, having covered business news for a long time, that somehow, and you know it better than I do, that the MSME sector has not quite caught the attention of media after so many years. Even if there are 63 million MSMEs, even if there are 120 million people employed by them, even if 30% of the GDP comes from them, even if 50% of exports is from this great sector. So it's contributing much as the formal sector, industry and services, maybe not so much in employment, but as much in output, production, and in obviously in employment much more. So can you tell me that when the formal sector goes through gets a cold and has starts sneezing, then formal media quickly recognizes it and then addresses the issues related with that, either at a vertical level and sometimes even at a company level. So the share of voice that formal industry gets is clearly not in the same proportion that what the MSME sector has been getting for the last 20 years. Why is that so? And give me three things that MSME sector needs to do, as well as media has to do, to make it more on par, that if I'm contributing 30-40% of the GDP, formal services and industries contributing 30-40% of the GDP, I'm contributing 50% of exports, then why am I not having the same share of media, share of mind as media covers the formal sector? You can give us some tips what MSMEs need to do and what associations need to do, but also what journalists may need to do also as you goes forward.
Yeah, I think the truth is, as at least as my interpretation of it or understanding of it is, unfortunately not so. It's not maybe not the best thing to hear. I think the first thing is that even whether it's newspapers or television, they will focus. Let me talk about newspapers first. You want to focus on brands. You want to focus on individuals who will light up your page one. You will focus on acquisitions and mergers and sales and anything that people will immediately relate to. So why will I talk about a small company, including like myself, sitting in one corner of Lower Parel in Mumbai, when I can talk about, let's say, what Titan Industries is doing, or which is a brand and a company, or let's say Reliance Industries is doing, where you have much more. You have a billionaire owner. You have the country's largest and most capitalized, market capitalized companies, revenues, and everything that goes with it. So it's more fun to read. And of course, they're doing things that you want to read. So that's one part. The second is that when you look at television, for instance, like a CNBC where I worked in, the focus is on listed some companies, because the audiences, and that goes for newspapers as well, the audiences who consume business press largely look for news in and around in and around listed companies. And that's really the equation that you read about companies, because even if you're not directly investing, it's there in the back of your mind. And a listed company in itself is some sort of representation of scale and size. It may not be correct, particularly in the startup era, because you have companies who are worth billions of dollars and are not listed. But that's really it is a representation, and therefore I think people focus on companies which are listed, large, and also the news that they generate, because there is some degree of there's an aura around them, there is some mystique, and there is interest in what they're doing. So it did change in many ways, this whole equation, in the last 10 years with the whole startup boom. But I feel that media also went overboard on that. I think media focused too much on fundraisers and valuation that continues to, which is fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong in that. But I think it again missed out the sector that we are now talking about, which is small and medium enterprises. So I think then the question is, how do you capture what is happening in the small medium enterprise space, and how do you depict it in a way that's also interesting? Because just to say that I want to talk about SMEs is no point, because no one's going to read. SMEs themselves will not read it. Right. So I mean, that's a slightly different discussion, but I do feel that I mean, now when I see things as a practitioner, I do think there are a lot of issues. There are a lot of interesting stories of people, of organizations, of families who built organizations, small ones, large ones, held on to them over time, created a niche and a cachet both, and are worth talking about. But it has to be done in a way that's interesting, like I said before, to make it interesting for others. But we are unfortunately trapped a little bit between Aura, the listed company universe, and the perception of what could be interesting to the broader audiences, which usually involves brands in some ways or the other, or large brands.
Yeah, I think partly, I think you've answered the question, but the thing is that in my mind, and you worked on all sides of the fence, is that if you want to see MSME 2.0 being seen on par with Industry 4.0, then somehow that sector, in whatever way, entertaining way, information way, appealing way, has to also get the same opportunities and share a voice. Otherwise, going forward, I feel that always when there's a shock to the system, what comes to our rescue is the agriculture and the rural sector, and this has happened 2-3 times. I
and
suspect
it's happening now. Agriculture will grow at 2.5% at the end of the year, as projections by CRISIL, because I just interviewed DK Joshi, the chief economist of CRISIL, this morning. It'll grow at 2.5%. The rest of the economy will contract 9%.
Yeah, so you said it. So the thing is that going forward, one would like to see an economy where even if rural and agriculture doesn't perform, doesn't come to a rescue, will MSME 2.0 play that shock absorber, that buffer? When will that happen? And that will only happen when small businesses become mainstream media conscious, and they're already contributing, mind you, but they will also be seen as way of buffering the shock, and maybe that might give the TRPs and the eyeballs, but it's something we need to think about as we go forward.
Yeah, probably I think no, but I think that just to sort of but I think there is a slight structural challenge here because if you say 63 million SMEs employ 120 million people, that's really two people per SME, on an average, and
Right.
that means there must be many SMEs with literally one person,
Oh,
so.
yeah.
So there is a scale challenge, and there are very, very good historical policy reasons for that. But I think we have to, as a country, as an MSME universe, become bigger.
Sure. Okay.
And unfortunately, like I said, history is on the wrong side, as in it's not been kind and it's tough. It's also sometimes, if companies have been around for 20, 30 years, that's already one generation going on to the other. I mean, someone who's battled, let's say, doing business in this country for 30 years or 40 years, you may not have that energy. I mean, you're not a 25-year-old now anymore, who
Yeah.
can walk into three venture capitalists and say, I've got this cool idea and all of that. You've lost. I mean, you'll be amazed. I remember once, I won't name that person, but I remember once interviewing about maybe 15 years ago, a very well-known business or industrialist in the auto space. And it was one of his very rare interviews. And he said, at the end of it, and he said it on record. He said that, you don't realize the number of years we have lost. He says, I spent time in India, overseas. He says, what we could have done. We are big today, but when I look back, the number of years we've lost only trying to kind of become big, get somewhere, fight the system, and so on.
Yes, I think that's well said. And just so that you're a data guy, that even the MSME sector classification, do you know that 99% of all these MSMEs fall into the first M, micro,
Yes,
below 1
yes,
crore. And
yeah,
my definition is small n, nano, micro. So if you look at micro, I think a lot of them will be nano, mom and pop stores, and small family run 1%, 2% companies. I think that's the distribution of the contribution of MSMEs. And I think what will happen is that when you discuss about MSMEs, the government's putting a lot of money there, so that somewhat boosts up the presence and the media consciousness. But clearly, a lot more needs to be done. Now, coming to your own personal journey, you're a digital media entrepreneur, and you have been one of the first entrepreneurs who went into multi-channel network, which is, you can explain to everybody what that means. But that was something which is not top of mind. If you walked into somebody's office and said, "I want to do this," they'll say, "Okay, thanks a lot. Enjoy the cup of tea, and we'll call you. Don't call us." But
so
you, by force of making that quick entry at that time and making it successful, so that many people came after that into that particular segment.
yeah.
What made you choose that particular topic as a digital entrepreneur? What options did you see, and how have you been able to exploit that? And are you happy with where you are today?
Yeah, okay, let me start with the happy part. I think I'm happy. That's and now let me try and attempt the other questions. I think I wouldn't take too much credit for the digital the digital foray, so to speak, Prabir, because digital was the only logical let's say path in this century, or
Right.
particularly in the last decade. There is no way, if you were feeling like you want to do something and be in the news or news content space, you can do something that's physical, unless you have lots of money and huge capital base to start with. So digital is the only way you can distribute or reach people, and that's what people like me have done, whether it's through India Spend or Boom, and try to build on that. Now, I've been a little ahead of a few others, but I think that's more fortuitous. It's just that where I was in my journey, and I quit my last job. I spent 1 year with Aadhaar, as you meant, little less than a year actually, with Aadhaar, because that was the time I was trying to figure out what to do next. And I started India Spend. So we were already in the middle of the digital age, so there was no choice but to go digital. But having said that, digital monetization is low. It's much lower than print or television. Relative to
Right.
everything else. So
Right.
scaling is very, very difficult. So we all remain niche, small, focused, and try and raise, get revenue, but in a way that we can keep going and doing what we set out to do.
Great. So you also happen to be a pioneer, and I use my choice of words very with a lot of thought in fake news busting and fact checking, something which people thought was a nice to have kind of, not a business, but a nice to do kind of activity. And you run one of the most high traffic news busting or fake news spotting sites in India, if not in the world. And you also have global partners who you work closely with. So how do you navigate the pushes and pulls of public and business interests and compulsions of both public and business interests? It's a very sensitive kind of role. So how do you navigate that?
Yeah, so so one of the things that's happened, Prabir, even as all these shifts have taken place in from in terms of audience attention, revenue flowing from traditional physical media to let's say digital, is that I mean, there've also been a lot of power shifts, right? Where you consume your news, the platforms you consume, whether it's YouTube or via Google or a Facebook or an Instagram or a WhatsApp, so that is where you are consuming. So today, it's in the interest of many of these platforms to work on keeping their platforms safe and
Right.
ensuring that there is no misinformation or it's not being used to spread hatred and so on. So that's where we come in. So in a way, I mean, we do a few things which are regular media partnerships and so on, like any media organization. But we also, another source of revenue for us is to work with the platforms themselves and fact check content on the platforms and fact check posts that have been flagged as false, for example, on
Right.
Facebook. And
Right.
and so in a way, I mean, while the platforms have, let's say, grabbed a lot of share of audiences and eyeballs, they're also investing in some ways for various reasons to keep those platforms safe. And that's where people like us come in. Though what we set up much before this became a business opportunity, if you want to call it that, or one-sided business opportunity. I mean, we set it up because we were focused on data and evidence, and we focused on data and evidence, fact checking became an automatic extension.
Right. So I would say that uh, fact checking and finding out the truth and is like an inflection point for you guys, because the same thing, say demonetization was an inflection point for payments, and maybe COVID is an inflection point for e-commerce. So is this something which now will become a long tail business of yours, or you continue to do it regardless of the uh, business compulsions or non-business compulsions?
So, I mean, everything I've done so far is not been driven so much by business compulsions.
Got it.
And journalists don't make very good business people, Probir. I'm sure you figured that out by now. I mean, some of these revenue sources that we are seeing today did not come to us because we looked for them when we started what we started, and I'm sure they will go too. But something else will come. I mean, as long as we stay focused on solving a problem, in this case, helping make the internet safer, and I'm sure we will find revenue either because of what we do or because of the discerning audiences who come to us. I mean, the few million audiences who come to us, I mean, are looking for something, are looking for the truth, are looking for someone who is putting things in context, are looking for someone who will help them, get back to someone else on WhatsApp, who's distributing
Sure.
misinformation. So yeah, I mean, I think, I mean, we have to keep evolving rapidly.
Sure. No, I think that's what one does, that whenever we find something going around on our WhatsApp groups, we generally reach out to someone like you or someone else saying, hey, this looks really, genuine, but please check it out. It looks unbelievable at the same time. So can you give all of us here, including the participants and who are looking at us today, some few tips on how to catch fake news and how to spot misinformation so that we can go out and watch for that and maybe help you in crowdsource or minimize the spread of misinformation and fake news? Any tips on that?
Right. So I'm going to give you some tips, and I'm also going to give you our helpline. Just one moment. It's 7700 906588. I'll repeat. 7700 906588. So this is our WhatsApp helpline, where you can just forward things that you feel are fake and you want it checked. It is, I mean, it's a tech thing which monitors all the time. You can actually get responses as well. And someone, I mean, it's usually monitored by a human. I mean, there's a human, this thing, at least for 18 hours in a day, if not a little longer. So what are the things that you can do? I think the first thing is that paradoxical as it might sound, you should not trust anything, right?
Wow.
You should start, I mean, that has to be your starting point. So because what is the fundamental problem? The fundamental problem is there's not enough critical thinking in the way we consume content, all of us, right? So now one is to say that, okay, I can develop critical thinking, but as I can do that, in some ways, maybe the good thing or the best thing to do is to say, okay, can I start from scratch? So which means I do not trust anything. So so that does not mean I do not consume anything, but I at least have another layer of filter before I believe anything that comes to me, either in my WhatsApp inbox,
Right.
or on Instagram or Facebook or my YouTube feed or anywhere, right? So the second thing is that have a healthy degree of skepticism for images and videos presented in a certain context. You know, if you see a video, oh, look at this Bollywood actor doing this, oh, look at that politician doing that. Remember, there's a good chance that it belongs to a different time period. It belongs to, or the photograph itself maybe have been played with or morphed or doctored, and is being used to obviously create a certain narrative. Third is that remember that there are people for whom this is a livelihood. The people, when I talk about people, I mean those who create misinformation, those who disseminate information, and those who do it actively all day and maybe night in this country and in many other countries. So someone benefits from this. So it's not, so messages that seem innocent and land in your inbox are not always landing because it just so happened. It's not an accident.
Right.
If Probir forwards me something, someone who forwarded to Probir may have created it with a objective of influencing you or me or all of us. So that's the third thing to remember, that everything is coming. Very likely there is someone who benefits from pushing forth a certain narrative, whatever it is, social narrative, political narrative, communal narrative, and so on. The fourth is that, extending from the third, is that a lot of people are trying to create divisions in our society, and therefore we must be careful of anything and everything that comes to us, and again not believe it because it sounds like it is probable. You know, it sounds like some set of people did something, or because it connects with a notion that we already have about a certain set of people or a community or a race or whatever it is. So be careful, including in the case of coronavirus or COVID. Remember that there is no cure, there is no vaccine at this point of time. So everything that people talk about, and that is one way of creating a filter, is most likely false. Do not believe anything that says that, oh, mainstream media is not going to report it, so you read it here. Yes, there is a problem there when it comes to trusting mainstream media. Trust in mainstream media is at an all-time low for some of the reasons that we talked about right in the beginning. But that doesn't mean what is coming into your WhatsApp inbox is true either. So remember that. And finally, how do we address it? I think I mean, the first is, let's say, the defensive part. But what can be the more aggressive part? The aggressive part is, I think, to say that, okay, can I form specialist news sources?
Right.
Can I vet my news source carefully over time and then say, okay, this is a news source I will believe, or I will maybe consume it, but I'm not going to believe it. So, for instance, I will use this news source only for breaking news, but I'm not going to try and listen to their opinions of what happened, because I know that their opinions will be colored. So that's one. The other is to go specialist and say, okay, I'm in science, I will look at Scientific American or Science.com or British Medical Journal, or Cleveland Clinic when it comes to medicine. And if I'm an engineer or an architect, I develop my own sources of information and news, which more likely will be accurate and not biased by any other this thing. So obviously that makes my life a little less exciting as well. But then I think that's the price we have to pay. And like I said, build our own sources and build it very carefully. Finally, I think we have to teach and educate our children about what is on the internet, what to believe, and what not to believe. And I mean this. I mean this very, very. I want to say this very emphatically, because if we do not teach our children about what the internet is in a larger sense, about their relationship with the internet, then we will have, and as we already have, a very big problem, because the internet is about everything. Let me give you an illustration. I have a catch in my shoulder. I Google, right? I'm sitting in front of a laptop. I Google and I say catch in the shoulder. I find 3 sites, all of which are reputed sites, WebMD, maybe, there are a bunch of others. And one of them says, okay, a catch in your shoulder could be because of 8 reasons, right? So the first reason is because it's a sprain. And the last reason is maybe bone cancer, right? So now, am I equipped? Think about this carefully. Am I equipped to take a call on whether it's the first or the last? Yeah, sure, it might be the first, but then suddenly I'm thinking, oh, what if it's the last? So it's not that the information on that site is wrong. It's completely accurate. But I, as the consumer, am not equipped to consume that information, and therefore I have to teach myself what not to consume, and which is what we should be teaching our children particularly. So the solution in this case is my physician, who knows me, knows my physiology, or and knows whether it's likely, or if the physician suspects something, may refer me to a specialist and then say, okay, go and do tests and so on and so forth. But I shouldn't be taking that call. Similarly, children, when you say, okay, I want to find out more about Probir Roy, so I Google, so which website do I trust, and which website? And for instance, Probir Roy was doing something 10 years ago, and I find that site. Like many people pull, I found out that I have a Wikipedia, in my name, and many people pull my, let's say, details from there. A lot of it is inaccurate or dated, because what I'm doing today is not accurately represented in that Wikipedia, because maybe no one else has updated it or whatever. But a lot of young people, actually a lot of all people, take that for as the truth or as the accurate representation, and it's not. Wikipedia is a good representation, but it by no means is it an accurate representation of anything. So how do you train yourself on how you should interact with the internet? How do you engage with the internet? What do you consume? What do you ignore? How do you know where the source is? How do you train yourself to go to the source? The equivalent of going to a library and going through many, let's say, titles to say, okay, this is what will help me establish what happened in 1776, and so on. So I think that's the last part, is that how do we train ourselves and our children to engage with the internet in a manner that we use it for the good and not for the evil that it also represents.
Yeah, I think that I see that, and that's absolutely bang on, and you've said it with a lot of passion and conviction. But in my school group, on a lighter note, I used to earlier go and bust up bad misinformation or wrong information. I kept doing this, and I found I was not the most popular guy in the group, and therefore I actually stopped doing it. Now I've become a passive member of the group, and everything flies below the radar, above the radar. I just don't have the heart to tell these people who are doctors, engineers, scientists, professors, that what they're talking is absolutely wrong, because then you get into a different interpersonal dynamic. So it's easier said than done. And I personally, I go around trying to bust fake news, and trying to do it little discreetly and subtly, and knowing which battle to pick. That's another one. But having said that, I remember of another famous saying by another mentor of yours, and probably all of us, Narayan Murthy, who says, in God we trust, the rest bring details. So that's what you're basically trying to say. My last question is that you have been a media entrepreneur, and now a couple of us have come to you, are watching you, and there are some folks in the group who are thinking, I'm 30% of the MSMEs which are going to find it difficult for me to move forward. My business model is dead. I want to do something more. I want to take a new sector. So if you had to advise a young person or even a elderly person, if they want to enter the media business, what are some opportunities that you think they should get involved in? Are there opportunities in MSME media, or is it a oxymoron? If they are, what are some areas which you would think they should get into? For example, the work that you do of Boom Live is actually a cottage industry. There are very few people doing it. The business model is not formed up as yet. It's not clear. The guys who are producing the bad news, their business model is very clear. So you have more of them on that side. So is there a long tail of entrepreneurism available that MSME people can take as a pivot, or someone wants to enter it because they're fascinated by it? What tips would you give such an entrepreneur or
Right.
potential?
Yeah, and I think this is already happening, Prabir, and that's nice to see. A lot of people I meet who run smaller digital organizations like us, and maybe even bigger than us, are actually people who've come from or migrated from other worlds. You know,
Right.
I mean, I've always been a sort of a reporter and a writer and a journalist, as in a journalist, reporter, writer, in print and then in television. But many of the people I see who founded outfits have no connection with my world, from the world as I knew it. I mean, they come from technology. Many of them come from technology. Some come from other worlds. So in that sense, the opportunities are opening up to everyone.
Right.
Only thing I would say is that, so there is an opportunity. I think the second thing is, now you want to be in media. So I think if you feel that there is a gap, and there are some stories that are not being told, or there is something that is not being said, then you should by all means get into it. The only thing I would say is that when you get into something, also remember that whatever you do has to be interesting, has to be presented well, packaged well, and then distributed. You know, so the internet, as many people have said, can also be a desert. You know, and we all go through that. You know, you can create something, it looks interesting and you think it's great, but no one is reading it because no one is, it doesn't just come into their you know, so just because your distribution cost is zero doesn't mean there is no distribution cost. You know, there is a cost to finally ensuring that my website or my product is seen by you. You know, so in that sense, it resembles a traditional physical world. So yeah, I mean, think about what problem you're trying to solve. If you say that, yes, I want to tell the stories of people who work in small enterprises, and there are great stories of
Right.
struggle, of hard work, of success, which others can benefit from, then I should do that. But as I do that, make sure that it's interesting, engaging, and fun to
Okay.
read. And people will, or read or watch, as the case may be, and people will.
And hopefully also make some money also, so that they don't bleed. That's key
So
actually.
it goes back to the first part. If people want it and consume it and want to, they will. You will find a way of generating some revenue. If you want to make big bucks, maybe I'm not sure this is the right space.
Any question from your side before we wind up, Govind? Anything that you would like to ask that I can quickly, respond, and before I hand over back to Sanjeev? I know in
No,
my question, a lot of thoughts is myself, but still.
yeah. No, I mean, this was a fascinating conversation, Prabir. I think I don't know whether I've because I straddle a couple of worlds. I don't know whether it's a
Yeah,
mix of too many things, but I hope I don't know. Maybe my at least my insights into what the media world is like was useful, and I don't know. I hope you feel that we can still bring some let's say sanity into the
sure,
entire space. And
sure.
if you have any suggestions on how we can do it, that would be most useful.
I think one of the ways to kind of bring sanity is to have such sessions where people like WASME actually create a platform where we get people from all walks of life, entrepreneurs, businessmen, economists, to come and share the platform and talk to people who may not have had that exposure. I think that's one thing that we are doing in our own small way. So with this, I would like to thank you, Govind, for your time. I know you're extremely busy and tied up. There's no doubt about that. And thank you for coming and spending time with us and sharing your thoughts with all the people who have come today to attend the talk. I would like to again thank Sanjeev for giving an opportunity for all of us to get the message out there. 90% is messaging, and the 10% is actually the message itself. And I think we are looking at the distribution part right now. And slowly, I guess the content will fill in and then become a minimal viable business in time to come. So thanks again for your time, your patience, and for all your answers, which are absolutely great. Sanjeev, I just want to hand back to you.
Thank you so much, Prabir. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Prabir. It was a wonderful conversation, Govind. Thanks. Wonderful means conversation. I would like to just ask you one question. Nowadays, for the last 2 months, I think lots of sensation on the some of the media. You can just say about the Republic means Bharat or Bharat. They have already means continuing with one means that report, that is the Sushant Singh case, and they have created lots of sensation in the and that particular space. And other media, they were just talking about other news, but they have also switched back to that particular news. What I have observed, I was the only person in my house who was just consuming news, Hindi news or English news. But the last 2 months, my other members, they are also consuming the same thing. So this way, they have already increased their TRP. Is it the ethical way? We have got frustrated with this kind of news, but other people are getting into this. So this is what is your views on that?
So your question is, so is it no? Is it good or bad? No, I didn't get the last part of the question. Sorry, I got the background.
Is it ethical? Whether government should interfere and stop this kind of sensation? Now, Sushant Singh has already.
So I don't know about specific.
Yeah.
Understood. So I don't know about the specific channels because I don't watch any of them. But I can tell you one thing. I think so. Currently, there is nothing in the way this space is regulated that prevents them from, let's say, focusing on one issue, focusing on Bollywood all day. There's nothing that which says that you should be spending time talking about what's happening in the economy and so on. It's a very marketplace. It's a market-driven activity. There is demand and there is supply. So unfortunately, if there was no demand, there would not be supply. So people want to watch it. And maybe in times of COVID, people want to watch more of it because it helps you take your mind off, the problems that we're facing at work, at home, or whatever. So, unfortunately, I think while we may think it's ethical, or I mean, it's non-ethical, or people should not be sensationalizing news. My sense is that in this kind of market environment, it will happen. And there is like we talked about earlier, there's a demand supply problem, and you have 400 news channels fighting for the same revenue pie, and the only way you can get a larger share of revenue pie is if you show good TRPs every week. Then we are going to be in that cycle. So as a viewer, I think I should understand that. If I understand that, maybe then I know that, oh, they're doing this because they want ratings for their revenue, and therefore then I will watch something else, or I will not watch TV at all. So I think we have to be more aware of why something is happening, and it goes back to what I said about creating a layer or building filters between what but between me and what I consume in whatever platform, whether it's TV or digital or news or whatever. And people said, okay, how do I start on social media? I said, don't believe anything, or if you believe, then take a lot of effort before you decide who to believe. So unfortunately, the onus will always be on us. If we don't consume, then there will not be any supply.
But the thing is that it is again dirtying the environment. it is impacting the children or other person in the house. The way they are just representing their facts and figures means horrible. It's horrible. But
Maybe there
people,
are facts.
mass is consuming. That is the only thing, and they are getting rating. Lots of these important issues are there, like border issues and all, but they are just repeatedly, means 24 hours, they are broadcasting the thing, and people are
Right.
consuming.
So, Dr. Like, all I would argue is that do not watch. I mean,
No, no,
find other.
I will not do that. But the thing is that the government should interfere and regulate this kind of media. And we are just talking about the IBA, Indian and Television, ITA or the IBA something, Broadcasting Association.
Broadcasting
Uh,
Association.
are they regulating this kind of thing?
No. So NBA is self-regulatory. So I mean, they will not have the. I mean, I don't think they have it in them to focus on this issue in this manner, because there are large organizations, there are small organizations, and I mean, everyone is chasing ratings at this point at any cost, and so somewhere the gap. I mean, even as they chase ratings, then there could be other reasons. I mean, it's obvious that some television channels are clearly, let's say, following a certain agenda. Maybe government, it may be someone else. So I'm just saying that the supply side is very messed up right now. And the only thing is to educate ourselves and our children or people around us about being more self-aware about consuming information and news, and being being cognizant of the fact that someone is only trying to entertain us and not really give us information for what it is, you know. So
Thanks.
it's not an easy thing to do. I know it's
But
not easy to do.
yeah, it's not easy.
One question, Bob, with MSME. Whenever we are just talking about MSME, Praveen has already talked about the facts and figures. I also explained the fact 99% and all, and 95% micro. So while choosing or selecting the media space for their advertisement or the communication path, so what should be the composition of that? Because like television, the newspaper, the OTT platform, lots of platforms available. So how do you suggest?
So you're saying that MSMEs, no, sorry, can you ask come again with the question?
MSME means we are just talking about the micro, less than 5 crores of turnover. While selecting to promote their brands on platforms, so how do they select or the composition of the spaces, print, electronic, and other media like?
Yeah, so I mean, I don't think people look at size. I think people look at what is exciting and what is interesting. So if you look at the whole startup coverage that we've seen, you know, so if you were a company in Bangalore that came up with this cool social app, you may have no revenue. You may have just got whatever, maybe 25 lakhs of investment, but it sounds cool, so people write about it. I don't think size is the issue as much as the idea or the kind of idea it is, and therefore people talk about it. So if there are interesting ideas, if there are interesting ventures, if there are interesting stories of the people who run those ventures, I think they should be written about, and they are occasionally, but not as much as they should be. That's for sure.
But Dr. Sanjeev, there is some silver lining to this now, Govind. Yeah, startups are also now seen as part of the MSME sector. So
Yeah.
hopefully, if some good stories emerge of startups, then we can say these startups are MSME startups, and then automatically you will get the rub off on branding and attention from media, which will give you a little bit of a boost. So that's one good thing that the government has done to plug startups also along with MSMEs, and they are more sexy as Govind knows. So they will catch the attention. They will get the small sector much more visibility than it's getting right now. If there are any other questions, Dr. Sanjeev?
Yes. Any question from any participant?
No, sir. I think participants don't have any questions. I've already asked from them.
Now, so one last question from me again. I am also one of the participants over here. So one question is the digital transformation or digital would be the new normal for MSMEs, and they are lacking in that particular space. They do not have that kind of understanding of the digital platform and digital media, digital marketing and all. So what kind of suggestion you can just put forward to MSMEs so that they can empower and come out of this crisis and all?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not prepared for this question, but I mean, because it's a very important question and a good one. I mean, so, I was talking to someone from a larger company just 2 days ago in the garment space. And they were saying that basically, those companies, even in the manufacturing space, who are better prepared today in some ways, even though they've been hit. And it's not even, in business, you can say I can prepare for a 30% loss in revenue, 40%, but in many cases, it's a 100% loss in revenue. So how do you prepare for that? And you can't. But the thing is, those companies that have had some kind of digital transformation in either the way they work, the way they connect with their consumers or their principals or their vendors, are definitely better off today than those who have not. And I think that's the only moral of the story. So how do I train myself to become more digitally digitally connected, to be digitally aware, and to be thinking in every possible way, in every way of using the internet at every point. I mean, whether it's, like I said, whether it's consumers, producers, suppliers, vendors, principals, and use this time to, and I'm sure many have been already, and we're already now in September, so we've already gone through the period of trouble. And while it will continue, but I think we've understood what this new world is like. And yeah, and I think use this period to research and understand how does digital apply to me in my organization, in my way of thinking. How does it bring about even more efficiencies than maybe what I've brought about? I mean, I like I said, I'm not really prepared for this answer, but or this question, but this is broadly what I would say. But it is that, and that's what makes it such an important question at this time.
Yes, yes. Thanks. Rich conversation and rich answer, everything. I would just request Megha for vote of thanks.
I, on behalf of World Association for Small and Medium Enterprises, it's a great honor to propose the vote of thanks to all guest speakers, participants, and WASME team. I would like to thank our distinguished speaker, Govindraj Etiraj, for making this webinar successful and interesting. I would like to express our profound gratitude to Mr. Prabir Roy for this presence in this webinar. I would like to thank our Honorable Dr. D.P. Agarwal, Secretary General WASME, and Dr. Sanjeev Lak, Executive Secretary WASME, for support and guidance. Once again, thank you all for making this webinar successful and your contribution. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Wonderful.